All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on this one. Wayne Henry Garrison. A name that sends chills down your spine, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Convicted serial killer, crime spanning decades. It's heavy stuff.
No doubt. So, to really get into this, we've got some interesting sources to work with. A book that focuses on lesser known serial killers,
Yeah.
and, of course, his Wikipedia page. Two different angles could be pretty revealing, don't you think?
Definitely. Garrison's case, it really highlights how tough it is to spot those violent tendencies,
Hmm.
especially early on.
Absolutely. And speaking of early on, the book mentions this really disturbing detail. One day, after getting a pet rabbit,
Oh, no.
Garrison killed it, snapped its neck, just like that. As a kid myself, I can't even imagine doing something like that.
Chilling, isn't it? And, animal cruelty, it comes up a lot in the backgrounds of serial killers,
Right.
but it's not always a sure sign, right? It's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But with Garrison, what's really striking is how fast the violence escalated.
And it takes a horrifying turn in 1972. Halloween night. Garrison's only 13 at the time. He's at his uncle's house.
Yeah, this is where it gets really bad.
He murders his 4-year-old cousin, Dana Dean.
It's brutal. He dragged Dana into the crawl space under the house, tied a headband around her neck, and suffocated her.
The horror Dana's family must have felt, it's just, I don't even know, to lose a child like that, especially at the hands of family.
A total tragedy. And it really brings to light the issues we face when dealing with juvenile offenders, especially in cases with this level of violence. Legally, psychologically, it's complicated.
And to make matters even worse, this wasn't a one-time thing for Garrison. Just 2 years later, in 1974, he takes another life. He's on a 10-day leave from a psychiatric hospital
Unbelievable.
when he kidnaps and kills 3-year-old Craig Neal.
It's awful. Suffocated him, hid his body under an abandoned house. The fact that this happened when he was supposedly under professional care, I mean, talk about a challenge, rehabilitating violent offenders. And then there's the whole psychopathy angle to consider.
Psychopathy. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure, it's a personality disorder, marked by a lack of empathy, no remorse, disregard for social norms, often impulsive, manipulative behavior, and it's strongly linked to criminal activity, violent offenses in particular.
So Garrison potentially fit that profile. It's terrifying to think he could commit another murder while undergoing treatment. And the sentence he received, only 4 years in prison, just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, the leniency of that sentence, especially for such a horrific crime, it definitely raises eyebrows today.
Yeah.
But we have to remember things were different back then. Our understanding of juvenile justice, the resources for rehab,
Right. Things have changed.
is a different landscape.
Okay, so after his release in 1977, things go quiet for a while. The book mentions he went back to high school, even graduated, blended back into society. It's almost eerie, like the calm before a storm.
That's one of the most unsettling things about serial killers, the normalcy. They could hold jobs, have relationships, all while hiding these dark impulses. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask. It can be right there in plain sight.
Chilling, to say the least. But that facade crumbles in 1989. Garrison commits his third known murder, the victim, 13-year-old Justin Wiles. And from what I've read,
Yeah, it takes a dark turn here.
this is where it gets really, really disturbing.
But brutality escalates.
Yeah.
Dismemberment, attempts to hide the remains in Lake Bixhoma. It all points to a more confident, more sophisticated criminal.
The book doesn't shy away from the details. To be honest, it's some of the most horrific stuff I've ever read. It's clear with each crime, Garrison was becoming more brazen, more depraved, and what's even crazier, he evades arrest for years. How is that even possible?
It's baffling, right?
Yeah.
Especially with witnesses placing him at the scene with Justin. The book talks about the investigators' frustration. They knew Garrison was their guy,
Yeah.
but they just couldn't get enough solid evidence to make an arrest.
This was before DNA evidence was widely used, right?
Exactly. Back in '89, they just didn't have the tools we have today. Witness accounts, but no forensic proof to link him definitively to the crime scene.
So they were stuck. What happened next?
Well, Garrison moved his family to North Carolina. Might have been trying to get away from the heat, start over, but as we know, he couldn't escape his past.
And while in North Carolina...
He got caught up in an insurance fraud case.
Interesting. Could that insurance fraud thing, I don't know, be connected to his psychological makeup? The book mentioned potential psychopathy, and it seems like someone comfortable with deception, manipulation, might be drawn to that type of crime.
Spot on. Even when trying to live a normal life, Those patterns of deceit, manipulation, which are often linked to psychopathy,
Right.
they can manifest in different ways.
So the insurance fraud landed him in trouble again. But how did they finally connect him to Justin Wiles's murder after all those years? What cracked the case wide open?
It all comes down to a bite mark.
A bite mark. Seriously.
Yep. While Garrison's serving time for the fraud, investigators saw their chance. Got a sample of his bite mark,
Okay.
and just before his release date in '99, they did something pretty bold.
Okay.
Exhumed Justin Wiles's body to compare dental records.
Whoa, they exhumed the body. Talk about going the extra mile.
It was a risky move, no doubt, but it paid off. The bite mark was a match. Finally gave them the evidence they needed to arrest Garrison. And get this, they caught him just minutes after he walked out of prison for the fraud charge.
Wow, what a story. So did he confess then?
Not exactly. He insisted on his innocence the whole time. He even tried to point the finger at someone else during the trial.
Really?
His lawyers tried to pin the murder on George Kent Wallace, a convicted serial killer already on death row.
Huh. Sounds like a desperate attempt to shift blame. But was there any evidence actually linking this Wallace to Justin Wiles?
None at all. And the jury didn't buy Garrison's claims of innocence either. 2001, he's found guilty, sentenced to death. Seemed like justice had finally been served. But then, things take another unexpected turn.
Wait a minute. Another twist. This case just keeps getting wilder. What happened?
Yeah.
Hold on. Another twist. This is getting crazy. What happened?
So, Garrison's death sentence, it gets overturned on appeal. Then, in 2007, he takes a plea deal.
Wait, so he's off death row, and instead of facing execution, he agrees to life in prison. No parole. That's got to be a tough pill to swallow for Justin Wiles' family.
Absolutely. Plea deals. Especially in these high-profile murder cases, they're always ethically and emotionally complicated. No easy answers there.
I can see that. On one hand, you've got the guaranteed conviction, avoiding the appeals process, all that. But on the other hand, it feels like a compromise. Like he's not really facing the full weight of his actions. Tough call.
You're exactly right. It's a balancing act for sure. In Garrison's case, the plea deal, it did bring some closure to the Wiles family. Knowing he couldn't hurt anyone else must have offered some peace of mind.
So that's it. That's how the Wayne Henry Garrison story ends. Not exactly the resolution I was expecting.
It's rarely that straightforward, you know. This case, it leaves us with more questions than answers. Makes you think about the nature of evil, the limits of our justice system, the impact of violence, how it ripples through individuals and communities.
You know, it's interesting. We've spent all this time talking about the violence, the investigations, all that. But what really sticks with me are those years when Garrison was just, blending in, seemingly normal, chilling, right? Makes you wonder who you can trust.
It really does. Those silent years, they're thought-provoking for sure. They raise so many questions about rehabilitation, about identifying those psychopathic tendencies. Can someone really commit such horrific acts while appearing completely normal? It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. Makes you question everything you think you know about people. Are there any real warning signs? Can we predict or prevent these tragedies?
That's the million-dollar question, right? No foolproof way to predict who will become violent. But research does point to some factors. Childhood trauma, substance abuse, untreated mental illness, they can increase the risk significantly.
So early intervention, access to mental health resources, that's key.
Absolutely. Addressing these risk factors early on is crucial. Not about labeling kids, creating fear, but about providing support where it's needed most.
It's like they say, hurt people hurt people. If we can break that cycle, maybe we can prevent some of these tragedies. So we've covered a lot here. The crimes, the investigation, the trial, even some bigger societal questions. What stands out to you most about this case?
For me, it's the mystery of Garrison's motives. What drove him to do these things? Was it rage? Lack of empathy? Some twisted need for control? We may never know for sure.
It's like a puzzle, but some pieces are missing. And that not understanding the why, it's almost the most unsettling part. It leaves you with this unease, the darkness lurking in unexpected places.
Brings up a big question. What does the case of Wayne Henry Garrison teach us about ourselves? About society? About good and evil?
That's a deep one. What are your thoughts?
Well, it makes us examine our own ideas about human nature. We like to put people in boxes, good or bad. But it's way more complicated than that. Like with Garrison, individuals can be capable of immense kindness and unimaginable cruelty.
Right. The line between good and evil, it's not always so clear. Even with these horrific acts, there's room for compassion, belief, and the possibility of redemption.
Exactly. And while Garrison's case shows the terrible impact of violence, It also shows the resilience of the human spirit. The victims' families, the investigators, even the legal system, all working towards justice, accountability, meaning amidst the chaos.
That's powerful. It's easy to get lost in the darkness, but remembering those glimmers of hope, that's important. So, after this deep dive, I'm curious, would you have voted for the death penalty if you were on the jury for Wayne Henry Garrison?
Wow, that's a hard one. I'm not sure I have an easy answer for that.
I get it, it's emotional, right? You see the details, the pain inflicted on the victims. But then you have the moral side. Taking a life, even one as troubled as Garrison's, it's heavy.
It's a huge decision,
Right.
weighing justice and mercy. There's no simple solution.
You're telling me this whole deep dive, it's really opened my eyes. The criminal justice system, the ethical questions dealing with violent offenders, punishment versus rehab, forgiveness, the scars that trauma leaves behind.
It's a journey, isn't it? Exploring these issues, trying to find understanding, even if there's no clear-cut solution.
It is. And sometimes the most important lessons come from the questions we ask, not the answers we find.
Well said.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the unsettling world of Wayne Henry Garrison. It's a reminder that the world can be a dark and unpredictable place. But it also highlights the strength of the human spirit, our constant pursuit of justice, even in the face of true evil.
Couldn't agree more.
And to everyone listening, thanks for coming along for the ride. Hope this deep dive gave you some new perspectives, got you thinking. Maybe you've got some questions of your own now. Remember, the world's a complex place, and there's always more to discover.
Absolutely. And if you want to explore these topics further, there's tons of resources out there. Books, articles, documentaries. Go out there and learn. Challenge your own views.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. You know, as we're wrapping up this whole Wayne Henry Garrison thing, something's been bugging me. We talked about the bite mark, how it finally led to his arrest.
Yeah.
But that whole process, exhuming the body, it
Yeah.
seems like a long shot. Was bite mark analysis really that reliable back then?
That's a good point. And raises a big question about forensic science in general. Bite mark analysis, it can be useful, sure, but it's also pretty controversial. You're comparing patterns in the bite mark to dental impressions. Sounds simple,
Right.
but bite marks on skin, they change over time. It makes it really hard to make accurate comparisons.
So it's not as foolproof as, say, DNA evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And back in the 90s, the techniques, the standards for bite mark analysis,
Yeah.
they weren't as strict. Scientists are realizing now that bite mark evidence, it can be subjective, prone to errors. There have been cases where it's led to wrongful convictions.
Wow, that's scary. Makes you wonder if Garrison's conviction, based on that bite mark alone,
Yeah,
would even hold up today.
it's a valid point. DNA technology, it's revolutionized forensics. And it's helped clear people who were wrongly convicted based on less reliable evidence, bite mark analysis included.
So what seemed like a sure thing back then is now viewed with a lot more skepticism.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to always be questioning, re-evaluating our methods, especially in something as important as forensic science. Justice has to be accurate. We need to use the most reliable scientific methods we have.
Makes you wonder how many other cases are out there, people behind bars because of questionable evidence. It's a sobering thought.
It is. But there's a positive side to this. This awareness about the limits of certain forensic techniques. It's led to changes in the criminal justice system. There's more focus now on making sure evidence is valid, reliable. That benefits everyone in the end.
That's good to hear. The system's learning and adapting.
It is. That evolution, it's crucial. The goal is justice for the victims and for those accused.
Well said. This whole deep dive into Wayne Henry Garrison, it's been eye-opening, to say the least. It's not just about a serial killer. It's about us, our flaws, our search for truth and justice. Definitely a lot to think about.
I agree. Garrison's case, it reminds us that even with the worst acts, we have to keep striving for understanding, for compassion, for a system that's fair and accurate.
Couldn't have put it better myself. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this journey. Hope this deep dive gave you some insights, sparked some critical thinking, maybe even left you with some questions of your own. Remember, the world's a complicated place. There's always something new to learn, to explore.
And if you want to go deeper into any of this, there are tons of resources out there. Books, articles, documentaries. Don't be afraid to dive in. Challenge yourself.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.